Hi, Kursat. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Casey. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So, as I was mentioning just before we started recording, your work has been really it's really interesting. I found it about a year or two ago, and it's really influenced how I've thought about ritual and creating meaningful experiences. But for people who are less familiar with the ritual design process, can you maybe just give a brief overview of what it is and maybe how it kind of came into being, how you kind of came to develop it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So actually, this work grew out of my PhD work at Carnegie Mellon. I was studying transitions, like how people transition, and as designers, how we can help people who go through transitions. It might be like big role changes, like when you become a new parent, when you have a new job, or maybe when you are retiring. How do we get more intentional and design experiences for people to increase their well-being? I think that was the beginning point of my work. And from that work, ritual came out as one of the key takeaways. So my learning from my PhD research was that rituals are strategies for people to deal with change and to better deal with change. And so after I moved to California, I decided to take that learning and how can I make this more like constructive. And then I decided to experiment with designing rituals. And that's when I proposed this as a class to this school, and that's how it started. So that was the beginning point. Right now it's 4 years so far. And the ritual design, it's really, the idea is bringing the process and intentionality of design into the designing of a ritual, like the ritual itself. So we follow the design process, but a little modified version of the design process. So what does this mean, design process, for people who are not familiar with? Right. So there are different names to design thinking. Like some people call design thinking, some people call human-centered design, but it's really getting into people's needs and desires. And we have an established process for that. So usually we have 3 steps. The first is discovery, where you look at people's everyday lives and then come up with insights on their pain points, their motivations, their goals. And then based on that, you move to the design phase and create a design and test it with people. And then there's a rollout, like delivery of the ritual. So the discovery, design, and rollout. So those are the 3 overarching steps. So, for instance, if you want to design a ritual for your team or for your friend, the idea is you first do a discovery phase where you talk to the person. So we usually rely on design methods like interviewing, and based on the interviews we do mapping. We call them journey maps. The idea is picking a specific day in the week or in their life cycle, and then mapping what that looks like.
The entire day.
Yeah, entire day. And then you also, based on that map, you also ask the person to draw an emotional graph of that day. So they map based on all the actions during the day. We almost have this like a very technical looking emotional map, but that gives us some starting points, like where do people feel low in their day, in that experience, and where can we flip that experience from a low moment to a higher moment, or from a dull moment to a more exciting moment. And that's where we stop. The discovery phase ends there, and then we start designing the ritual there. Yeah.
Can I ask a few questions about the discovery phase before we jump into the design phase?
Definitely.
So I actually based on the stuff you all had written, I actually went through a ritual design process with some folks at an unconference at NYU last summer. And it was really interesting to see how we kind of, related to the work. And one of the questions or things that we maybe, I think, had some trouble with was we weren't sure how granular to get in like mapping out the day or the experience, right? And we had some people where it was kind of like, like what is a significant enough event to kind of make it onto that map? What do you do with like days that might be different, right? Like maybe do you pick a standard day or like a kind of a guess, like an archetypal day, or do you actually pick a historical day to map because it's you can actually say this is what I did.
Yeah,
thinking about it.
That's a great question. So we suggest to pick a historical date, so not a typical date. That's when people get confused. It can be hard if you are just making it up, or like you are trying to make an average day. So like in our workshops, we ask people like pick the last Thursday, like a typical what happens last Thursday, and then the granularity is really end-to-end experience, like from your wake up to the going to bed. So this is more like mapping the day, but there can be also a weekly cycle. So I think that's, sometimes if it's longer than a day, it can get tricky. So for that, I think the one suggestion I might have is, go specific, like pick a week and then try to like put the start of the week or day and the end of the day and try to make sense of like what are the major events from that start to finish. Because if you get too granular, you might end up with a huge map that you can't really address. So put the start and end, and then I think that will scope out your map.
Cool. And again, historical week you'd recommend.
Yeah.
Look at your calendar for the last week or two and pick.
Cool. Pick a day and pick a couple days. Cool. Or if for instance, if it was a transition in your life, pick a meaningful, like most significant part of that transition.
Yeah.
And map that out.
Cool.
So actually, after you map the experience out, we also have another method to, I think we have a loose framework for designing a ritual. The idea is first you need to situate your ritual in a specific context, like a time, space, place. But then you also need to work on your intention. I think that part is also critical. Like what at that specific moment or overall in that your life cycle, what do you want to get out of from that ritual? Like what are your motivations, goals, beliefs, values? So intentions, sometimes some people don't have an intention doesn't necessarily have to rely on a value, but maybe it's something more practical. Maybe they want to become a better parent, so they want a bedtime ritual, so they feel like, oh, now I feel I'm a good parent. I think it can be as simple as that. Like, how do we get to that intention? So we ask our participants to almost like a brainstorm all intention possibilities, and then come to a core intention for their ritual. And then at the end of discovery, you have these two: the specific situation, time, space, like that low moment in the map, and the intention that they want to work on, like that will flip that moment. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. And then you move to the building of the ritual, the design part. Mm-hmm. So the design part is really, so how I frame ritual is really a theatrical performance. If you think, even as a personal ritual, you are acting a role as like in an ideal role usually. So when you are designing a ritual, then it's really designing a theatrical performance. So we rely on drama elements like role play, body storming, storyboarding, and then these when we usually start with the storyboard, and then people act out those scenarios and then see what feels right or awkward. And it almost, when you are doing the acting out, you are also refining your ritual in a way. And then once you have that, you come to a point where you feel this feels right, then we suggest our participants to codify the ritual. Like, how do you start the ritual? What happens, like the initiation? What happens in the center, and then how do you close your ritual? So they have that element. Mm-hmm.
So, can you talk a little about what body storming is for people who aren't familiar with the term? Yeah,
definitely. So, body storming is similar to brainstorming. The idea is you use your body to explore ideas because you are designing a movement. So it's a way to feel the space, feel yourself like in that specific role, and then you make suggestions. You make adjustments based on how your ritual feels in that specific space. I think this idea of body storming comes from Northern Europe, I think. Even we also have another term, experience prototyping. So you try to mimic the experience. So in a design, maybe you don't have access to, for instance, if you are designing a like airport experience and you don't have access to airport, or you try to mimic that space and then give people roles. Someone acts like a host, someone hostess, and then people like on the counter. It's really like a theatrical skit.
right.
And the idea is to refine your experience based on the feedback you are getting from that body storming. Yeah, it's a fancy way of experimenting with role play, I would say.
Yeah. So one question I actually have as well, kind of coming from this one run through we did of the whole process, is so how do you kind of encourage people to really get into the role playing process, but also to get into it in a way where they might not just be responding positively to a ritual because it's kind of like an idea that's brought up by their friend, or kind of how do you get them to respond realistically to really adjust the ritual to give it the best chance of actually kind of becoming picked up by the culture of an organization, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So I guess there are two questions. Like, one is, how do you convince others to try out the ritual? Is that the question, or while even designing it?
Yeah. So maybe if I can, let me try and say it again to be more clear.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is for people who might not be as familiar with improv or theater or kind of role play, how do you get them to kind of step into that frame of mind? And then the second question is kind of when they're in that frame of mind, how do you get them to really, or how do you encourage people to really respond as if they were like a real potential consumer of the ritual, right? As opposed to just kind of being supportive regardless of how much the ritual actually resonates. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is not easy. Yeah, like that part where people are not familiar with body storming or like that mindset of role play. We have been, that's one of our learnings actually. Like, this is not a traditional design challenge. So in design, I think as designers, our goals are usually coming to a point that our design solution is practical or effective, efficient. But ritual is kind of a different animal. So it's not about being practical necessarily. So to warm people up, so we spell this out at the beginning of the brainstorming, that you need to wear a ritual mindset. Almost now you are a ritual designer. So that means that you are not going after practical or efficiency solutions, but it's more about getting into the people's beliefs, values, like irrational motivations. We also push them for, can you be more weird, more quirky? So we give them these random prompts. We even developed an app for one of the classes. It's like similar to the MIT's Mad Libs idea. So we give 3 prompts. They are totally random. And we ask people to come up with a ritual for that. So it's really, I think the goal for us is to scaffold that transition from the mindset of a logical mindset to almost like ritual space where things not necessarily have to be practical or logical.
Right.
So it's a gradual, I would say, we give lots of prompts and help scaffold that. Even when we start our workshops, without telling anything, right? Okay, guys, now welcome. So your first task, you have 3 minutes, you will design a welcome ritual and then welcome other members of the workshop. So it's really, we push people into this space so they don't think too much. That's the other thing. If they think too much, their logical thinking comes to starts processing. But in ritual, the idea is, moving that past that. Your second question, how do you make people own and start acting like they are actually part of the ritual? I guess I think it goes back to that idea. If they are in that environment, I think there's no outsider. So everyone plays. I mean, in I guess school context, it's easier. Yeah, people play along well, so they get into that mental space quickly.
Well, I think also maybe like people with design background, maybe they're more familiar with like getting feedback and giving feedback, like very directly, right? And for people who may not have as much experience receiving or giving UX design feedback or product design feedback, at least I've witnessed not only here, but in like product feedback as well, there can be an inclination to just give positive feedback, right?
That's true. Yeah, that happens too. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the feedback piece, I mean, there are other ways you can, maybe sometimes people even, they don't like the word ritual. Like that's the other thing we are observing, especially in organizational context. Maybe don't call it a ritual. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to coin it as a ritual. Like read the situation, whatever works for your team, for your organization. I heard different things. Like I heard people calling plays or practices or intentional activities. So I think it needs to be flexible enough so people, if you lower the barrier for people, they will join better. And one of them is the jargon. If you don't use the jargon, people will be more willing to try it out, I think.
Right.
That's our other learning.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then there's the design phase.
Yeah. And then there is the last phase, the rollout, or in design language, delivery. Like if, okay, you design your ritual, what happens next? So you need to introduce this to your team, like life cycle. So for that, we suggest people to try this gradually. So it's not one thing I think we learned from one of our collaborators, Isabel Banke. She suggested, I think she brought this idea of the Wundt curve. So when you are rolling out a new practice, you should be thinking about the balance of the novelty. If you introduce a totally novel concept that's too far away from your existing routines, people probably won't adapt it. So, but if it's too boring, so people still, they won't adapt it either. So it's more like balancing the novelty when you are rolling out a ritual.
And what is that called again? The wand curve?
Wand curve. Yeah, I think it's a German psychologist from
Cool.
early 20th century. So I think in design we have a similar term called Maya, like most advanced yet acceptable. So it's more like you read the situation and you introduce something not too new but not too old, something that's like in the edge. I think ritual is similar. So maybe if you design a ritual that's too out there, you can almost like stage it. Maybe start with your adding like small pieces along the way to get to that novelty space. Also, another strategy for rollout is having these almost reading your team and finding these influencers. If the influencer does this, I think it will be easier for others to adapt. So I think that's another skill to learn, probably, how to find those influencers. But that's also, some people have more influence in an organization than others. Like if you can bring that person into your ritual, like if they own it, it will more likely to succeed in the long run.
I imagine if they're part of designing it,
yeah,
it's more likely to succeed long term.
Yeah. And the other thing we emphasize is don't take rituals too seriously. I mean, if you take this as an experiment, maybe come up with, instead of coming up one single like majestic ritual, come up with several of experiments and see this as an opportunity to try them out, which maybe one of them will stick, but others won't stick. So the idea is, because rituals are quick to prototype, they don't require the building, like it's not like we are building a software or hardware, it's really experience. So try them out and evolve it over time. Like for instance, I observed the evolution of a ritual here, like in my team. So students create this ritual called Crash the Desk. The idea is when a new employee joins, everyone brings their favorite object from their desks, and then the person needs to guess who owns what, and then it's like a jump starter for building personal relationships. But I observed there was an evolution when, like in one case, 3 people joined the team. So what do you do? Everyone has one memorable like object. So they had this almost like a hack. Everyone took one like index card, and they wrote something personal about themselves, but they didn't write their name. Instead of the objects, their favorite objects, people give these index cards to the newcomers. So again, they need to find out who, like, for instance, someone writes, my favorite sport is mountain biking, and then the person needs to guess who that person is, asks questions.
Right.
And, so also, one of our design principles is rituals evolve. I think the stereotypical thinking is rituals are rigid, they don't change, but in reality rituals are flexible and they evolve based on people's needs. So when we are designing them, we should be thinking that, or if this way doesn't work, maybe there's you can just make a change and then try to adjust to people's needs and desires.
Cool, very cool. I think that example is actually a great segue. I know you have a book coming out in a few weeks. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
April 9th. So it's very, soon.
Yeah. Right after the conference. So maybe send people to the Amazon page. So the book is Rituals at Work, right? And
Rituals for Work.
Rituals for Work. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the book and how that evolved from the work you're doing, and maybe just some examples of interesting from the book?
Sure, yeah. So as I mentioned, we started teaching the class 2015, and as part of the class, we began collecting examples from companies, from people. Even when people apply to our class, we ask them, what's your favorite ritual? I think that's one of our criteria selecting students. And so yeah, we accumulated all these rituals, and then I think at some point we thought this might be a potential for a book. So I think that's how, yeah, naturally it evolved. So we thought we should also, students came up with, I think the nice thing about the book is we have a mixture of company rituals and also some more student conceptual work as well. So we thought we should compile them, also make the research more accessible. So the book itself is very practical. It's like a playbook. Our personas for the book is the leaders, like organic leaders who don't maybe have a title on their role, the workplace role, and also managers and designers. So these three main personas who want to be more intentional about workplace culture, workplace practices. So we have 50 rituals for across 5 different themes, and it's more like a landscape. So we thought workplace, like there are 5 different use cases for rituals. Like the most obvious ones are community, like bonding, creating a community, transitions, when projects kick off, die off, people come, join, they leave. But there are also more nuanced rituals, like the creativity, flow, and finally the conflicts. We don't think much about conflicts usually, but rituals can also play a role in preventing conflicts or resolving conflicts. So those are our 5 themes. The idea is people can just look at one of those 50 rituals and then jumpstart their design, their practicing their design ritual. So a couple of examples. I think one ritual I really loved is actually it's from medical, like healthcare. So in our research, we were doing these interviews with thought leaders. So when I was talking to a surgeon, he mentioned me this ritual. It's called moment of reverence. And the idea is, so in surgery rooms, it's very high stakes situation. Like they need to really be acting like a team. And nowadays, after the checklists manifesto, like I told one, like the checklist is a big thing, but what they realize is it's not enough for people to act like a team. So the ritual follows like this. So they did their checklists, all that, they went through their lists, and then before they start surgery, the doctor asks like, what's different today? And then the nurse tells about the person who's gonna be in the operation, like who, maybe she's a parent, she's a son, she's a daughter, like just personalize that person. Like they have, and then the team almost like gets that focus that this is a real person. We are acting on a person that has all these relationships. And then after that, they have 1 minute of silence, and that brings people back to that. It's like a meditative experience. And then
that's amazing.
And then they start the operation. Yeah, I think that's, it really struck me too, like when I first heard. And you can take this and then apply this into the other domains as well. I think that kind of mindfulness before a high stakes situation in a surgery room case, it also helps people prevent their burnout or empathy fatigue if they have too much too much emotion, because they need to be acting as a one unit. So I think it allows them that. So I think that's one ritual. I also like, maybe that's more around the performance and flow. Another ritual I also went through myself is a pinning ceremony. It's from this school. I think one thing this school does well is bringing people to this community. So at the end of each studio class, there is a spinning ceremony. So it's more like after all that hard work, you come into the last class, and then there's a literally like a nice red velvet box with lots of pins. And there's a specific ceremony you go through. People pin each other, and then they are designers, and now they are part of the school community. I think it has layers of connecting people and also sense of belongingness for people.
Right.
Yeah, I think those might be the two examples. That I
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. One other question I had is, you, and I want to be respectful of time, so I do have a couple like just shorter questions to end it. Before we get into like the kind of shorter wrap-up questions, I'm curious that you come at this really from the academic perspective and also the practical perspective, right? And when I've done some looking into kind of like ritual study and the study of ritual, it seems like there's the people in the anthropology world who are kind of studying ritual from kind of a very academic, very theoretical perspective. There's some people in the psychology world. There's the people in the kind of divinity world who are studying liturgy or maybe like actually trying to create worship rituals and all that. But you said it kind of like the intersection of many of those. Is that right?
Yeah.
Where do you think this work sits in academia and theory? Is it kind of this interdisciplinary place without a home? Do you think design school or design studies is actually like a good place for it? Like where, if other people are interested in going down this line of study, where can they sit?
That's a good question. Yeah, we did our first, we did a gathering last year in May. It was very small summit. So we invited people from, like Casper was there. We have some business professors, design professors and anthropologists. I think it's an interdisciplinary field, I would say. I mean, I just use the term field. But I was talking to one of those design professors. He's from Oslo. He's a service design professor. And I think one of the ideas is that maybe there is potential for this kind of work to be in that interdisciplinary field. But it's early to say. I would say I'm also looking at, I'm at the moment designing a research study, and I'm borrowing psychology, the social psychology of creativity, as a way to approach this. So it's a mixture of design and psychology and a little bit, even anthropology. So I think short answer, it's an interdisciplinary field. Like HCI, like if you think similar to HCI, you have design, psychology. In HCI case, there's technology, but in this case, maybe it's more business can be the third field. Business, design, and psychology. Yeah.
So maybe it's I guess if someone was interested in going deeper into the field, it's kind of like pick the seat that resonates, like the perspective that maybe resonates most with the work you're doing, but kind of draw liberally from other fields. Like there's no like kind of PhD in ritual studies that you're going to find necessarily that is directly
Yeah, I mean the design will be probably I think one of the distinct quality of like this kind of work is maybe in anthropology or in psychology. It's more about studying the implications, or it's more like you don't act on the design brings that changing the situation, like changing the existing situation lens. So I would say in that sense it's part of design discourse, but with heavy influence from the social sciences.
Cool, very cool. And I guess kind of along those lines, what have been some of the resources, either books or kind of thinkers that have really influenced how you think about ritual design and as you were developing the process at D-School?
I guess from my PhD work, I'm a big fan of social psychology, like Erving Goffman, and his one of his students, Richard Collins. He's from UPenn. Rand Collins, Rand Collins, and then John Dewey. Those are my, based on my research. I think those are some of the influencers. Also, along the way, I got influenced by the Catherine Bell and Donald Grimes, Victor Turner, like these performance studies and ritual studies people. I think those are some of my influencers, of course, and the Clifford Geertz from the anthropology. So I think that was one of my first books that I read on anthropology when I got accepted to the PhD. So I think those are some of my resources that I use. And from the design side, I would say Richard Buchanan, and because he was my advisor too. So that was one of the I think those are some of the names that comes to my mind. Mm-hmm.
And I guess just the last question then, before we sign off. If people want to find out more about your work, learn more about the ritual design process in your book, where can they find you online?
So we have a website, ritualdesignlab.org. So we try to make that website lively. So we post our observations, our insights. We also have a Medium publication. So that's where we publish our learnings from the classes. So it's called, medium.com, ritual design. And we also have a new newsletter. I think that's one thing I'm trying to grow. So it's also on the website. You can sign up for our mailing list. So we call it Dispatches from the World of Rituals. So we have, personal rituals, team rituals, even human-robot rituals. We try to look at different domains. Mm-hmm.
I would expect no less from the Stanford D-School Design Lab. You got to have those human-robot rituals. Those are important. Well, Kursat, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm a huge fan of your work, and it was a real pleasure to be able to chat and hear a little bit more about how it came about and how you think about it. So,
thanks so much for inviting me, and hope this gathering will be a huge success. And I'm looking forward to attending as well virtually.
Fantastic. All right, thanks.
Bye.